So what is the nature of order all about? Took 25 years to write, 4 big fat books or big thick books. Unfortunately, a little expensive, about $60 a book. Thousands of lovely colored pictures. Anyway, what's it all about? When I finished the pattern language, I thought that I had come close to solving the problem of making good human environments, and that if people went to work and used all those patterns, something very beautiful and good would follow in the hands of ordinary people, and just from the use of that language, that pattern language. That turned out to be not true. The early experiments that I made after the book came out, the pattern language book came out, I made it over a period of years. I made experiments to see what happened when people actually used this, and yes, certainly things, I think people did things that were very, very helpful to them, and some of them are quite lovely just in the sense of being informal and being about that person or this person or that place and so forth. But the buildings and the groups of buildings and so forth were not really beautiful, to put it quite simply. They weren't. Luckily, I was, at that time, still relatively early in my professional life, and so I had time to think about this. And what the nature of order is about is, what does it take to make the things beautiful? Really and truly beautiful, in the old-fashioned meaning of the word, so that it touches you in your heart. And what these books attempt to do is to describe what is involved in thinking about that, what's involved in doing it, what's involved from a practical point of view in terms of construction, contracting, and so forth, what's involved from a spiritual point of view, so that you, as the maker, whoever that is, are in a sufficiently harmonious state to be able to make a beautiful thing. So it's really the gamut of all of that is what these books are about. I certainly got closer in those books than I did in the pattern language, a lot closer.
I've come to the conclusion that in order to set our ideas about architecture straight, and in order really to establish a clear picture of what we're doing when we build, it's necessary to make changes in our conception of how the physical universe is put together. That actually the order of space is prior to the issue of function. That is, in other words, although functional issues are overwhelmingly important, the root matter has to do with order in space, and that there are ways of getting hold of that issue which are so deep that they cover the functional issues, but they turn out to be more fundamental. And in fact, they have the ornamental stuff and the formal stuff as byproducts of them. But that structure, by the way, this structure that I want to talk about is not very obscure. I mean, I can easily put a name on it. I can call it wholeness if you want. We can call it many things. And I'm going to show some examples of physical things that have this a deep kind of wholeness in them, and then we'll just talk a little bit about what sort of structure they have. Can we say anything about what these structures are? Can we be explicit about it at all? I, after thinking carefully about this for a number of years, been able to identify somewhere around about a dozen, something between a dozen and 15 different structural properties that repeatedly exist. Now, of course, it remains to be discussed and argued whether these deep structures are important or not. When one discovers 12, 15 properties of a certain sort, which are structural properties that appear to characterize a class of structures, then you say to yourself, well, what is going on? What are these properties? I mean, where do they come from? What's the meaning of them? And quite simply, the conclusion that I've come to, I don't know if it's the right way to explain it, is that they are essentially the different ways in which space can be glued together to become whole. If it's true that space has the capacity to be more whole or less whole, and there are real structural properties that have the capacity to glue it together more or less, both in a functional sense and in a deep sense, I mean, then of course in some way one would start to confront a kind of moral imperative that that is what we're supposed to be doing when we make something, to glue space together like that. Of course, another very important question that you ask is, well, how do you produce something which has this unity of space or this kind of wholeness or this glued together quality? How do you actually go about making something like that?